My name is Lyra Caldwell. I am 31 years old. All my life, I felt out of place, like I was living someone else's story, wearing someone else's name, sitting at a table where my chair was always the one they forgot to pull out. I spent 28 years trying to earn a seat in my own family, and last October, I found out why I never could. It started with a notebook, a water-stained, leather-bound notebook, tucked behind the radiator in my grandmother's old apartment. Inside were letters, hospital records, and a truth so devastating it unraveled everything I thought I knew about who I am. My Uncle Richard looked at me at Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago, in front of 42 family members, and said, "You don't even belong here." He was more right than he knew, but what he didn't know was that belonging and blood are two very different things, and I was about to prove it. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you. Drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from and what time it is there. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, in a 3-bedroom colonial on Wethersfield Avenue. White shutters, red door, a maple tree in the front yard that my mother, Helen, planted the year I was born. From the outside, we looked like every other family on the block. 2 parents, 1 daughter, Sunday dinners at Grandma May's house on Prospect Street. Normal. But inside that house, nothing was normal. Not really. I was 5 the first time I noticed it. My birthday party. My mother had baked a cake for me. Vanilla with strawberry frosting. My favorite, but when Uncle Richard arrived with his son, Nolan, everything shifted. Nolan was 3 months older than me, stocky, loud, always the center of gravity in any room. Richard walked in, set a wrapped box on the table, looked at my cake, and said to my mother, "Helen, you know Nolan's allergic to strawberries. You couldn't have made chocolate?" My mother apologized. She actually apologized. On my birthday, she scraped the frosting off half the cake and replaced it with Hershey's syrup, so Nolan could eat it. I remember standing there in my paper crown, watching the pink frosting disappear, and thinking, something is wrong here. Not wrong with me, not wrong with anyone specific, just wrong. The way a child senses a crooked picture frame before they know the word crooked. I didn't have the language for it yet. I just knew that my birthday had been rearranged for someone else, and nobody thought that was strange except me. At 8, I joined the school art club. I had drawn a portrait of our family for a county-wide contest. Me, my mother, my father, Douglas, Grandma May, Uncle Richard, Aunt Patricia, Nolan, everyone. I won 2nd place. They gave me a ribbon and hung the drawing in the Hartford Public Library for 2 weeks. When I brought the ribbon home, my father glanced at it and said, "That is nice, Lyra." He set it on the counter next to the mail, and never mentioned it again. That same month, Nolan scored a goal in his Pee Wee soccer game. Richard bought him a $200 pair of Nike cleats. My father drove 40 minutes to watch the next game. He had never driven 5 minutes to see my art show. At that age, I didn't feel rejected. I felt confused, like everyone else had read a script that I hadn't been given. I kept trying harder, thinking that eventually I would do something big enough to make them turn around and really see me. I didn't realize yet that the problem was never about what I did or didn't do. Here is what you need to understand about the Caldwell family. There was a hierarchy, and it was never spoken out loud, but everyone knew their place. Richard was the firstborn, the one who filled rooms. My mother, Helen, was the quiet second child. My father, Douglas, was a machinist at Pratt & Whitney, who worked long shifts and said very little. And then there was me. I was 10 when I overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear. It was a Sunday dinner at Grandma May's. I had gone upstairs to use the bathroom, and was coming back down the hallway when I heard Richard and my father talking in the kitchen. Richard's voice was low, but I caught the tail end of the sentence. "Doug, you know the situation. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." My father said something I couldn't hear. Then Richard said, "She is not even," and stopped. Because Grandma May walked in. She looked at both of them, with a coldness I had never seen on her face, and said, "That is enough, Richard, not another word." I didn't understand what they were talking about. I filed it away the way children do, like a puzzle piece with no matching edge. It stayed there for 18 years. But something shifted in me after that night. The confusion I had felt at 5 and 8 began to sharpen into something darker. For the first time, I started to wonder, was the distance between me and everyone else intentional? Was there something about me, something fundamental, that made them hold back? I was 10 years old, and I was beginning to suspect that the problem wasn't that I hadn't tried hard enough. It was that trying would never be enough. I was 12 when it got worse. It was Christmas Eve at Grandma May's. The whole family was there. Richard, Patricia, Nolan, my parents, Grandma May, a few cousins from my mother's side. 20 people, maybe more. Crowded into that small dining room with the green wallpaper and the china cabinet that was always locked. Grandma May pulled me into the kitchen while everyone was opening presents. She held my face in both hands. Her fingers were cold. She looked at me with this expression I couldn't read then but understand now. Sadness, guilt, something heavier than both. "Lyra," she said, "you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Don't let anyone tell you different." I didn't understand. I was 12, I said. "Okay, Grandma." She pressed a small locket into my hand. Inside was a photograph of a woman I didn't recognize. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes like mine. "Keep this," she said. "I will explain when you are older." She never did. Grandma May had a stroke the following March. She survived, but she lost most of her speech. The words she had been saving for me disappeared into the silence of a hospital room at Hartford General. I visited her every Saturday for 6 years until she passed. My mother never told me why Grandma May always looked at me that way. At 18, I graduated third in my class from Hall High School. I had been accepted to the University of Connecticut with a partial scholarship to study forensic data analysis. The day I got the acceptance letter, I ran downstairs and showed my parents. My mother hugged me, but it was the kind of hug that ends too quickly. My father nodded from his recliner and said, "UConn's a good school. Practical." 2 weeks later, Nolan got accepted to Syracuse. Richard threw a party. 60 people at the Pond House Cafe in Elizabeth Park, catered. A banner that said Syracuse bound. My father gave the toast. He stood up in front of everyone and said, "Nolan, you are the pride of this family." I was sitting at table 9, near the kitchen, next to a woman I would never met. Nobody introduced me. Nobody mentioned UConn. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot for 45 minutes. The engine was off. The windows were fogging up. I kept replaying my father's words. The pride of this family. Like there was a ranking. Like I wasn't even on the list. And here is the thing that happens when you have spent your whole childhood being overlooked. You stop blaming them and start blaming yourself. At 18, sitting in that parking lot, I wasn't angry at Richard for throwing a party my father never threw for me. I was asking myself what I had done wrong. What was it about me that made love so conditional? Was I not smart enough? Not warm enough? Not enough of a Caldwell? That question, "What is wrong with me?" became the soundtrack of my 20s. I carried it into every relationship, every job interview, every room I walked into. And I answered it the only way I knew how, by giving more, by being more useful, by making myself indispensable to the people who had never once made me feel essential. That is when I understood something I had been circling for years. In the Caldwell family, I wasn't invisible because I had done something wrong. I was invisible because they had decided I was somewhere. At some point, a line had been drawn, and I was on the wrong side of it. I just didn't know why. Not yet. By 28, I had built my own life. I had a career as a forensic data analyst at a consulting firm in downtown Hartford. I made $94,000 a year. I had a one-bedroom apartment on Capitol Avenue with exposed brick walls and a fire escape that overlooked Bushnell Park. I had Evan Matsuda, software engineer. Quiet, steady, the kind of man who remembers how you take your coffee and never makes you feel small. We had been together 3 years. He had proposed on a Tuesday, no ring yet. Just the question standing in my kitchen at 7:15 in the morning, while I was making oatmeal. I said yes before he finished the sentence. But even with all of that, something gnawed at me. A feeling I couldn't name. Like a word stuck on the tip of your tongue, or a door you keep walking past but never open. My mother called me every Sunday at 4 p.m. The conversations lasted exactly 11 minutes. She would ask about work, I would ask about the house, we had talk about the weather. She never mentioned my father unless I asked. She never mentioned Richard or Nolan, unless they had done something worth celebrating. She never, not once, asked about my engagement. After Grandma May died, the family dynamics didn't just shift, they collapsed. Richard became the patriarch. He controlled the holidays, the guest lists, the narrative. At his annual 4th of July barbecue, he seated 40 people in his backyard in Glastonbury. And I was always at the far table, the one near the fence, the one they brought out when there were too many people and not enough chairs. Over the years, I had contributed more than I should have. I paid $6,400 for my father's dental surgery when he needed implants. I covered $3,200 in property taxes for my mother when she fell behind after my father's hours got cut at the plant. I sent $500 to Nolan's wedding fund because my mother asked, and I couldn't say no. I kept a spreadsheet. Not because I wanted the money back, because I needed proof that I existed in this family, that I showed up, that I gave, that I tried. And that is the cruelest stage. Not the confusion of being 5, not the suspicion of being 10, not even the raw pain of being 18. It is the quiet resignation of your late 20s, when you have tried everything, given everything, and the distance hasn't closed by a single inch. You stop asking what is wrong with me, and start asking how much more can I give before there is nothing left. The answer, I was learning, was not much. If I never found out the truth about why they treated me this way, I would spend the rest of my life trying to earn something that was never going to be given. I had raised children who would watch their mother shrink at every family gathering. Evan would watch me come home from Sunday dinners with that hollow look in my eyes. The one he had learned to recognize, the one he never knew how to fix. The worst part wasn't the exclusion. It was the not knowing, the gaps in the story. Grandma May's strange looks. The locket with the stranger's photo. My father's distance, that felt less like neglect and more like avoidance. Richard's hostility that seemed too personal, too specific, to be ordinary family friction. Evan had seen what it did to me. He had watched me come home from Thanksgiving dinners and sit on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, staring at the wall. He had held me on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m. when the anxiety hit so hard I couldn't breathe, and I would whisper, "What is wrong with me?" And he would say, "Nothing. Nothing is wrong with you, but something was wrong, not with me." With the story I had been told about who I was, and the longer I went without the truth, the more it would hollow me out from the inside. And then, slowly, something began to change, not overnight, not dramatically. More like a crack in a dam that starts with a single drop. I started noticing things I had trained myself to overlook. The way my mother's voice tightened whenever I mentioned Grandma May. The way my father's eyes would skip over old family photos. The way Richard's cruelty toward me had always been surgical, specific, aimed at something deeper than personality clashes. For the first time in my life, I stopped asking what is wrong with me and started asking a different question. What are they hiding? That shift from self-blame to investigation changed everything. I didn't know it yet, but I was already becoming the person who would find the truth. My whole career was built on finding patterns in data that other people missed. I just hadn't turned that lens on my own life. One Thursday night in September, I was cleaning out the closet in my apartment. Top shelf behind a box of old tax returns. I found the locket Grandma May had given me 20 years earlier. I opened it. The woman inside stared back at me with my own eyes. That night, I sat on my bed with the locket in one hand and my phone in the other. Evan was asleep. The rain was tapping against the fire escape. I made a decision. I was going to find out who that woman was. I was going to find out what my family had been hiding. And I was going to do it the only way I knew how, methodically, carefully, one piece of evidence at a time. If I never found out the truth, I had never know who I really am. 3 days later, I got a call from a property manager named Dennis Huerta. Grandma May's apartment on Prospect Street had been sitting vacant for 2 years after her death. The family had argued about what to do with it. Richard wanted to sell. My mother wanted to keep it. Nobody could agree, so nothing happened. Dennis was calling to say the building had been sold, and anything left in the apartment needed to be removed by the 15th of October. My mother asked me to handle it. Of course she did. The invisible daughter is always the one who gets the work nobody wants. I went on a Saturday morning, the 3rd of October. The apartment was exactly as I remembered. Green carpet, plastic-covered furniture, the smell of lavender and mothballs. Grandma May's world preserved like a museum. Nobody visited. I started in the bedroom. Clothes, shoes, photo albums. I packed them into boxes, labeled them, stacked them by the door. Methodical. That is how my mind works. I see patterns. I notice what doesn't fit behind the radiator in the living room. There was a gap in the baseboard, not damage. Intentional. Someone had pried the board loose and tucked something behind it. I reached in and pulled out a leather-bound notebook, water-stained, held together with a rubber band that snapped the moment I touched it. I sat on the floor, cross-legged. The notebook was heavy for its size. The leather cracked, the pages yellowed from decades of sitting in warm air. Someone had taken care of this. Someone had meant for it to survive. The first page was Grandma May's handwriting, shaky but deliberate. For Lyra, when the time comes. My hands went still. I turned the page. Inside were documents. A photocopy of a birth certificate from St. Catherine's Hospital, dated the 14th of March, 1994. My birthday. But the name on the certificate wasn't Lyra Caldwell. It was Lyra Morrison. Morrison. I read it twice, 3 times. The mother's name was listed as Caroline Morrison. The father's name was listed as James Morrison. The attending nurse was a man named Edwin Harlow. Behind the birth certificate was a letter handwritten, dated June 2000. It was from Grandma May to someone named Margaret. I didn't know any Margaret. The letter read, "Margaret, I have made my decision. I am keeping this to myself for now. Helen cannot handle it, and Douglas will not. Richard already suspects, and he is using it like a weapon. The girl deserves to know. But not yet. Not while she is so young. I have spoken with Edwin. He remembers everything. When the time is right, Lyra will find this. I have made sure of it." A letter tucked behind a photocopy mentioned someone I never knew, a name, a nurse. A secret buried in a baseboard for over 20 years. I sat in that apartment until 7:32 p.m. I didn't move except to turn pages. The notebook contained 14 documents in total. Birth records, hospital admission logs, a handwritten timeline of events from March 1994, and 3 photographs. One was the same woman from the locket, Caroline Morrison. The other 2 were hospital photos. Newborns in the nursery at St. Catherine's, 2 babies, 2 wristbands, 2 names. I called Evan from the car. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. I found something at Grandma May's apartment. What kind of something? The kind that changes everything. He didn't ask me to explain on the phone. He just said, "Come home, I will make coffee." That night, I spread every document across our kitchen table. Evan sat across from me, reading each one, not speaking. When he finished, he looked up. "You need to talk to someone who was there," he said. "I know. Edwin Harlow. If he is still alive, and you need someone you trust to help you through this." I knew exactly who to call, Clara Whitfield, my best friend since freshman year at UConn. Clara was a paralegal at a family law firm in New Haven. She was sharp, organized, and she would never once made me feel like I didn't belong. I texted her at 11:47 p.m. "I need your help with something. Can you meet me tomorrow? It is about my family." Her response came in 30 seconds. "Name the place. I am there." The night Grandma May gave me that locket, I was 12. I didn't understand the weight of what she was handing me. A photograph of a stranger. A promise she couldn't keep. But Grandma May had always been deliberate. She didn't misplace things. She didn't forget. Even in the years after her stroke, when words failed her, her eyes never did. Every time I visited her at the care facility, she would grip my hand and look at me with an intensity that felt like she was trying to transmit entire sentences through her fingertips. She had prepared for this. The notebook behind the radiator wasn't an accident. It was an archive, organized chronologically, each document in a plastic sleeve. She had expected someone to find it. She had expected me to find it. For Lyra, when the time comes, what Grandma May didn't tell me, and what I had learned from Clara's research 3 days later, was that Edwin Harlow hadn't just been a nurse at St. Catherine's Hospital. He had been the head of the maternity ward. He had filed an internal incident report in March 1994, the month I was born, documenting irregularities in patient records. That report had been buried by the hospital administration. Edwin Harlow had been quietly reassigned, and then he had retired. He was 73 years old now, living in Wethersfield, 12 minutes from my apartment. What my family didn't know was that the truth they had buried wasn't gone. It was organized, dated, and waiting, and the woman they had spent 3 decades treating as an afterthought had spent her entire career learning how to find patterns in data that other people missed. They had no idea what was coming. Clara and I met at Tisane Euro-Asian Cafe on Farmington Avenue the next morning. Sunday, 9:15 a.m. She was already seated when I arrived, a legal pad open, her reading glasses on. I set the notebook on the table between our coffees. "Start from the beginning," she said. I walked her through everything. The locket, Grandma May's words, the notebook behind the radiator, the birth certificate with the name Morrison, Caroline Morrison, James Morrison, Edwin Harlow, the letter to someone named Margaret. Clara didn't interrupt. She took notes. When I finished, she looked up and said, "Lyra, this is a paper trail. Your grandmother built you a paper trail." "I know. Who is Margaret?" "I don't know yet. We need to find out, and we need to talk to Edwin Harlow." I needed to know the truth before confronting them. Every detail mattered. Over the next 11 days, Clara and I worked through the notebook systematically. 3 locations, 3 sets of records, 3 layers of a story that had been hidden for 28 years. Location 1. The Hartford County Records Office. Clara used her paralegal credentials to request archived birth records from St. Catherine's Hospital, March 1994. The records confirmed 2 births on the 14th of March. Lyra Morrison, born at 2:14 a.m., and another baby, unnamed in the archive, born at 2:47 a.m. to Helen and Douglas Caldwell. 2 girls, 33 minutes apart. Same ward. Location 2, St. Catherine's Hospital. The hospital had been absorbed by Hartford Healthcare in 2008. Clara submitted a formal records request. What came back, 3 business days later, was a partially redacted incident report from March 1994, filed by Edwin Harlow. The report described a discrepancy in patient identification bands in the maternity ward on the night of the 14th of March, 2 newborns. 2 bands. A shift change at 3 a.m. A nurse who noticed the bands didn't match the bassinets. The report had been marked resolved internally. No parents were notified. No corrections were made. Location 3. Edwin Harlow's home. 47 Maple Ridge Drive Ive, Wethersfield. I went alone. Wednesday, the 14th of October, 4:30 p.m. He opened the door in a flannel shirt and reading glasses. He looked at me for a long time. "You look just like her," he said. "Like who?" "Caroline, your mother." We sat in his kitchen for 2 hours. He told me everything. On the night of the 14th of March, 1994, 2 baby girls were born within 33 minutes of each other, in the maternity ward at St. Catherine's. During the 3 a.m. shift change, a temporary nurse mixed up the identification bands. By morning, each baby was in the wrong mother's arms. Edwin noticed the discrepancy 3 days later when reviewing discharge paperwork. He reported it to hospital administration. They investigated internally and confirmed the switch. But by then, both families had taken their babies home. Both families had named them, bonded with them, begun building lives around them. The hospital's legal team made a decision. They would not disclose the error. The risk of litigation, the emotional damage, the potential media exposure. They buried the report. They reassigned Edwin. They closed the file. I told one person, Edwin said. Your grandmother, May Whitfield. She came to the hospital asking questions about the birth records. She had noticed things. You didn't look like Douglas. Your blood type didn't match either parents. She was persistent. I told her the truth. And she kept it secret. She was trying to protect you. And your mother Helen loved you, Lyra. That was never the question. But the truth was complicated, and May was afraid of what it would do to the family. But Richard knew. Edwin paused. Richard overheard May talking to me on the phone, 1997. He confronted her. She made him promise to keep quiet, but Richard is not a man who keeps promises without leverage. I sat there in Edwin Harlow's kitchen, holding a cup of tea I hadn't touched, and understood everything, every cold look, every exclusion, every time Richard had treated me like a stranger at my own family's table. He had known since I was 3, and he had used it as a weapon for 28 years. Evan was waiting when I got home. He had made pasta, rigatoni with garlic and olive oil, the meal he always made when he knew I needed something warm and uncomplicated. I told him everything. When I finished, he pushed his plate aside. What do you want to do? I want them to say it out loud, in front of everyone. No more hiding. He reached across the table and took my hand. Then we plan it together. But on your terms. We spent the next 5 weeks preparing. Not for revenge. For clarity. Thanksgiving. The 25th of November. Richard's house in Glastonbury. The annual gathering, 44 people. The same house, the same long table, the same seating arrangement, where I had spent 30 years at the far end near the fence. Except this year, I wasn't coming to sit quietly. I arrived at 2:15 p.m., Evan beside me, Clara in the car, parked on the street, ready if I needed her. I carried a brown leather folder. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. Aunt Patricia had set the tables. 3 of them, end to end, stretching from the dining room through the living room. White tablecloths, autumn centerpieces. Name cards at every seat. Mine was at the far table, near the kitchen. As always, I moved my name card to the center table, right across from Richard. He noticed. He always noticed when I did anything unexpected. He glanced at the card, then at me. He didn't say anything, not yet. The meal went smoothly for the first hour. Small talk, laughter. Nolan showing pictures of his new truck. Patricia talking about her kitchen renovation. My mother sat at the head of the center table, quiet, pouring wine for everyone, avoiding my eyes. At 3:45 p.m., Richard stood up to give the annual toast. He did this every year. It was his ritual, his stage. I want to thank everyone for being here, he said. Glass raised. This family has been through a lot this year, but we are Caldwells. We stick together. We take care of our own. He looked directly at me when he said our own. I stood up. The room didn't go quiet immediately. A few people were still talking. But when I didn't sit back down, the conversations faded one by one, like candles being blown out. I would like to say something, I said. Richard lowered his glass. Lyra, this isn't the time. It is exactly the time. My voice was calm, level. The same tone I use in depositions when presenting forensic data to a courtroom. Controlled, clear. 3 years ago, at this same table, you told me I don't belong here. I looked at him. Do you remember that? His jaw tightened. That was taken out of context. No, it wasn't. You said it in front of 42 people. I counted. And I have spent 3 years trying to understand why a man would say that to his own niece. Turns out, you had a reason. I opened the leather folder. On the 14th of March, 1994, 2 baby girls were born at Catherine's Hospital in Hartford. One was born at 20:14 a.m. to Caroline and James Morrison. The other was born at 2:47 a.m. to Helen and Douglas Caldwell. The room was silent. During a shift change at 3 a.m., a temporary nurse switched the identification bands. By morning, each family went home with the wrong baby. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father set down his fork. The hospital discovered the error 3 days later. They chose not to tell either family. They buried the incident report. They reassigned the nurse who found it. I pulled out the photocopy of the birth certificate. Lyra Morrison. My name, on the original hospital records, is Lyra Morrison. I was born to Caroline and James Morrison. I have been living as a Caldwell for 31 years, because of a clerical error and a cover-up. Richard's face went white, not red. White. The color of a man watching a wall collapse. You have known this since I was 3, I said, looking at him. Grandma May told you, and instead of helping this family deal with it, you used it. Every holiday. Every dinner. Every time you pushed me to the edge of the table and pretended I was less than. Lyra, you don't understand, he started. I understand everything. My voice didn't rise. I have the hospital incident report. I have Grandma May's notebook. I have a sworn affidavit from Edwin Harlow, the head of the maternity ward, confirming the switch. 14 documents. Each one dated, each one verified. I set each document on the table, one by one, the birth certificate, the incident report, the affidavit, the photographs. Richard gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles were white, and I have letters. 3 of them, written by Grandma May to a woman named Margaret Morrison, Caroline's mother, my biological grandmother. May reached out to her in 2001. She wanted the families to know. Margaret wrote back. She wanted to meet me. My mother was crying, not loudly. The kind of crying that has no sound. Mom, I said. My voice softened. I know you love me. I have never doubted that, but you knew. You have known for years. And you let me spend my whole life wondering why I felt like a stranger in my own family, instead of just telling me the truth. She couldn't speak. She nodded. Clara walked in through the front door. She had been waiting. She stood beside me and handed me one more document. A letter from Margaret Morrison, dated 2001, addressed to May Whitfield. Dear May, I read, thank you for your courage. I have suspected for years. Caroline sees it too. We don't want to disrupt Lyra's life. We just want her to know that she has another family who loves her. Whenever she is ready, we are here. I looked around the room, 44 people. Some with forks still in their hands. Nolan was staring at his plate. Patricia was gripping the edge of the table. My father was looking at the wall. Richard opened his mouth. I did what I thought was best for this family, he said. No, I said quietly. You did what was best for you. You used a secret about a child to make yourself feel powerful. That is not protection, that is cruelty. Clara put her hand on my shoulder. Not a word, just presence. I looked at my mother. I am not angry, Mom. I am tired. I am tired of pretending I don't notice. I am tired of sitting at the far table. I am tired of being the one who gives everything and gets an 11-minute phone call on Sundays. I closed the folder. My name is Lyra. I was born to Caroline Morrison and raised by Helen Caldwell. Both of those things are true. And from now on, I am done letting anyone make me feel like I don't belong. The room stayed silent for a long time. Then, from the far end of the table, my father spoke. For the first time in 31 years, his voice cracked. I am sorry, Lyra. 3 words. 31 years late, but I heard them. That night, I drove home with Evan. The leather folder sat on the back seat. Neither of us spoke for the first 10 minutes. How do you feel? He asked. Like I just set down something I have been carrying my entire life. At 10:15 p.m., I sat at my kitchen table and wrote 3 emails. The first was to a family attorney Clara had recommended, not to sue. The statute of limitations had long passed, but I wanted a legal record that couldn't be buried again. The second was to Margaret Morrison. Clara had tracked down her address in Branford, Connecticut, 26 miles from my apartment. My biological grandmother had been living 26 miles away my entire life. Dear Margaret, my name is Lyra. I believe you have been waiting to hear from me. I would like to meet you whenever you are ready. The third was to my mother. Mom, I love you. That hasn't changed, but things need to be different now. No more silence. When you are ready to talk, really talk, I am here. She replied at 6:14 the next morning. 2 words. I am ready, Richard called. Twice that week, I didn't answer. He left one voicemail. Lyra, I think we should discuss what happened at dinner. You blindsided everyone. That wasn't fair. I saved the voicemail. I didn't respond. It is painful, knowing the family you grew up in kept a secret this large for this long. It is painful knowing the distance you felt wasn't in your head. It was engineered, maintained, reinforced every holiday, every dinner. But here's what I told Evan that night, standing in our kitchen at 11 p.m., both of us too tired to sleep. It is painful, but at least now I know who I am. He held my hand. You have always known who you are, he said. Now everyone else does too. The weeks after Thanksgiving moved slowly, like the whole world had shifted into a lower gear. 3 days after the dinner, my mother came to my apartment. She sat on my couch with her coat still on and told me everything she knew. She had found out about the switch when I was 4. Not from the hospital, from Grandma May. May had confronted her with the evidence. My mother had wept for 3 days straight, then made a decision. I was her daughter. Biology didn't change that. She would raise me, love me, and never let me go. But you never told me, I said. I was afraid, she said. Afraid you had leave, afraid you would choose them, Mom. I was 4. I didn't even know there was a them. And then something broke open in me that I had been holding back since Thanksgiving. Not the composed, strategic calm I had maintained during the showdown. Something rawer. Do you know what it is like? I said. And my voice was shaking now. To spend your whole life feeling like you are failing an audition nobody told you about. I tried so hard, Mom. I paid Dad's dental bills. I covered your taxes. I showed up to every holiday where Richard put me at the kids' table until I was 26. And the whole time, you knew why I didn't fit. You had the answer in your hands, and you watched me break myself trying to earn something you could have just explained. She didn't defend herself. She just looked at me with tears running down her face and said, You are right. I don't have an excuse. I have a reason. But it is not the same thing, she cried. I cried too. It wasn't neat. It wasn't a movie moment. It was ugly and honest and long overdue. And when we finally stopped, I held her. Because being angry at someone and loving them can happen in the same breath. That is the part they don't tell you. My father came to see me a week later. Douglas Caldwell was not a man who talked about feelings. He had spent 31 years communicating through nods and one-word answers. But he sat at my kitchen table and said more in 30 minutes than he had in 3 decades. He told me that when Grandma May first revealed the truth, he had wanted to go public. He had wanted to contact the Morrisons, hire a lawyer, hold the hospital accountable. But my mother begged him not to. She was terrified of losing me. And Richard, who had overheard and figured it out, threatened to tell everyone if Douglas made a scene. He held it over us, my father said. For years, every time I pushed back on anything, he would remind me, You want me to tell Lyra she is not really yours. That is why I pulled away. I thought if I kept my distance, it would hurt less when the truth came out. It didn't hurt less, Dad, I know. I know that now. Richard's consequences came gradually, then all at once. Within 2 weeks of Thanksgiving, the story had spread through the extended family. Not because I told anyone, because 44 people had been in that room, and secrets don't survive a crowd. But here is what nobody tells you about confronting the person who hurt you. The silence after is louder than the conversation. Richard called 3 more times in December. I had sit on my bed and watch his name light up the screen and feel something I didn't expect. Not anger, not satisfaction, doubt. A voice in my head whispering, Maybe you went too far. Maybe there was a gentler way. I asked myself the question I know some of you are asking right now. Does forgiveness mean letting someone back in? Here is what I decided. Forgiveness is not a door you open. It is a weight you set down. I could stop carrying the bitterness without inviting Richard back to the table. Those are two different things. I never called him back. I don't hate him, but I don't owe him access to my healing just because he wants to rewrite the story. Richard's wife Patricia called my mother in early December. She was furious. Not at me, at Richard. She had had no idea he had known about the switch. She had spent years watching him treat me like an outsider, and assumed it was just his personality. Learning that it was calculated, strategic, deliberate cruelty broke something in their marriage. By January, Patricia had moved into her sister's house in Simsbury. Their marriage, which had looked solid for 23 years, fractured under the weight of a truth Richard had weaponized. Richard tried to rewrite the narrative. He called family members individually, telling them I had ambushed him, that the documents were unverified. But Edwin Harlow's affidavit was notarized. The hospital records were stamped. Grandma May's notebook was in her own handwriting. Nobody believed him. Not because they didn't want to, because the evidence was too clear. Nolan called me in February. I almost didn't answer. I didn't know, he said. His voice was quiet, not the loud, confident Nolan I had grown up with. I swear, Lyra, I didn't know any of it. I just thought Dad was. I don't know. I thought that is just how he was. It wasn't just how he was. Nolan, it was a choice. I know. I am sorry. Thank you. It wasn't a long conversation, but it was honest, and that was more than we had ever had. The unexpected part came in March. Margaret Morrison wrote back. She was 81 years old, living alone in a small Cape Cod house in Brantford. She invited me to lunch. I didn't go that weekend, or the one after. Evan found me one Sunday staring at Margaret's letter for the third time. What if they don't actually want me? I said. I spent 31 years being the unwanted child in one family. I don't think I can survive being the unwanted stranger in another. She wrote you a 3-page letter, Lyra. She included photographs. She has been waiting 20 years. That is not obligation. He was right. But fear isn't rational. It is the scar tissue from old wounds. I went on a Saturday, 2 weeks after I would originally planned. Evan drove. Clara came too, but she waited in the car. This one's yours, she said. Margaret opened the door and looked at me. She didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then she said, "You have Caroline's hands." Caroline. My biological mother had died in 2016. Breast cancer? She had spent years wondering about me, Margaret said. She had even driven past my mother's house once, in 2003, and sat in her car for 20 minutes before driving away. She didn't want to disrupt your life, Margaret said, but she never stopped thinking about you. Margaret showed me photographs. Caroline as a child, Caroline at her wedding, Caroline holding a baby. Not me, her other daughter. My biological sister, Reese Morrison, 29 years old, living in New Haven. I had a sister. Let me ask you something. What would you do if you found out at 31 that there was someone out there who shared your blood, your history, your mother's face, and you would never once met? Would you call immediately, or would you sit with it? The way I did, for 2 weeks. Trying to figure out whether you were ready to expand the definition of who you are. I sat in Margaret's living room, holding a photo of a woman who gave birth to me, and never got to raise me. And I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not grief, gratitude for Grandma May, who had built a bridge between two worlds, and trusted me to cross it when I was ready. I met Reese 2 weeks later, coffee at coffee, on Audubon Street, in New Haven. She was already there when I arrived. She stood up when she saw me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. She was shorter than me, with curly dark hair and green eyes. She looked nothing like me and everything like me at the same time. The way she tilted her head, the way she held her coffee cup with both hands. She was a veterinary technician at a clinic in Hamden. She had a dog named Penny, a 3-legged beagle she had adopted from a rescue. She cried when she hugged me. Not a polite cry. A real one. "Mom talked about you," Reese said. When we finally sat down, every year on your birthday, she would get quiet. She'd sit by the window, and just look out for a while. When I was old enough to ask, she told me. She called you her first sunrise. The one she saw but couldn't hold. I couldn't speak for a while after that. I held my coffee and let the words settle into a place inside me I hadn't known was empty until that moment. By April, the landscape of my life had changed completely. I had two families now, the Caldwells fractured but rebuilding, and the Morrisons new but immediate, like finding a room in your own house you never knew existed. I asked myself one last time, does forgiveness mean forgetting? And I finally had my answer. Forgiveness means choosing what to carry forward and what to leave behind. I chose to carry the love. I chose to leave behind the silence. The financial fallout for Richard was real. He had been positioning himself to inherit Grandma May's share of a family property in Old Saybrook, a waterfront cottage that had been in the Whitfield family for 4 generations. It was worth roughly $480,000. After Thanksgiving, my mother and her 2 other siblings voted unanimously to sell the property and divide the proceeds equally, including a share for me. When my mother told me, my first reaction surprised everyone. I don't want it, I said. Lyra, it is yours. May would have wanted I didn't do any of this for money, Mom. Clara changed my mind. We were at Toussaint again, and she looked at me the way she does when she is about to say something I need to hear. Lyra, this isn't compensation, it is your grandmother's inheritance. Refusing it doesn't prove you are above it. It just means Richard still controls the narrative. Take it because it is fair. She was right. The cottage sold in March for $465,000. Richard received his quarter share, and nothing more. I put mine into a savings account for the future. Not because I needed it, because Grandma May had wanted me to have it, and honoring her wishes mattered more than my pride. The leverage Richard had held for 28 years was gone, and without it, he was just a man at a table nobody wanted to sit at anymore. His reputation in the extended family shifted permanently. At Easter, his own cousin Diane told him to his face. What you did to that girl was unconscionable. Richard. He left before dessert. Nobody asked him to stay. My mother and I talk every Sunday, not 11 minutes anymore, sometimes an hour. She has started therapy with a counselor in West Hartford. She tells me things I never knew. How she had lie awake at night, listening to me breathe, terrified that someone would find out and take me away. I kept telling myself that silence was the same as love, she said once. It is not. I know that now. My father leaves me voicemails, not often, but they are longer now, and he always signs off the same way. Love you, kid. 3 words, but they land different now. Today, I am sitting in my apartment on Capitol Avenue. It is a Sunday morning. The rain is tapping against the fire escape. The same sound that was playing the night I found Grandma May's locket in my closet and decided to start looking. The locket is on my nightstand now. Next to it is a photograph of Caroline Morrison, the woman who gave me life, and a photograph of Helen Caldwell, the woman who raised me. Both are true. Both matter. Evan is in the kitchen, making coffee. Clara texted this morning. Something about a case she is working on. A joke about how she is going to start charging me paralegal rates. Reese is coming to dinner next week. She is bringing her dog. The notebook is in a fireproof box under my bed. Not because I am hiding it, because it is too important to lose. Grandma May spent years building that archive. She couldn't speak the truth out loud, so she wrote it down, organized it, and trusted that the girl she loved would find it when the time was right. She was right. Here is what I have learned, and I want to share this with you because I think it matters. Family is not a building you are born into. It is a structure you choose to maintain. Some walls are load-bearing, some need to come down, and sometimes, the foundation you thought was solid turns out to be built on a secret that everyone agreed to keep. Belonging is not something anyone can give you or take away. It is not a chair at a table or a name on a card. It is something you build for yourself, brick by brick, choice by choice. Every time you decide that the truth matters more than comfort, and boundaries are not walls. They are doors. You choose who comes in, you choose who stays, and you choose when to open them and when to keep them closed. If you are watching this, and you have ever sat at the far table, if you have ever felt like the person in the family photo who doesn't quite match, if you have ever looked in the mirror and wondered why you feel like a stranger in your own life, I want you to know something. You are not broken. You are not the problem. And the answers you are looking for might be closer than you think. Sometimes, they are in a notebook behind a radiator. Sometimes they are in a conversation you have been avoiding for years. Sometimes they are in a question you have been afraid to ask because you are not sure you can handle the answer. Ask it anyway. I spent 31 years tiptoeing around a truth that everyone else already knew. And the moment I stopped asking for permission and started asking for answers, everything changed. The truth might hurt. It probably will, but it will also set you free in ways you cannot imagine until you are standing on the other side of it. My name is Lyra. I was born Lyra Morrison and raised Lyra Caldwell. I am both. I am neither. I am exactly who I have always been, and I finally belong. Not to a name, not to a family, to myself. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, have you ever discovered a truth about your family that changed everything? How did you handle it? Check the description for more stories like this one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. Sometimes the thing that helps most is knowing you are not alone. Until next time, take care of yourself. You are worth it.